Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 000 Freight for Cities webinar. This is day 3, Vision Zero for Urban Freight.
It's wonderful to have you here with us today. We're going to be talking about a very important issue for cities, freight and road safety. How do we achieve Vision Zero? And to get started, allow me to show you a brief introduction. So we want all cities that are sustainable. This is a picture from Mexico City where you can see cyclists really in big numbers and growing. This is Beijing in China, Copenhagen. We all want to have a fair share of our streets to make our city sustainable, to not have traffic crashes, to have good air quality and less congestion. But we also love our packages, don't we? And right now, because of the pandemic of COVID-19, we have getting even closer to have these personal deliveries coming to us to a cost. In 5 cities where WRI is doing research on freight and road safety, Bogotá, Cali, Buenos Aires, Fortaleza, and Sao Paulo, we have found that in a year, the number of fatalities related with trucks are 220. That accounts about 10% of the fatalities in all these cities. For every 5 fatal crashes, in 1, we have a truck involved in the cities of Buenos Aires and Bogotá. It is a serious issue. This is a little bit more the breakdown that I mentioned. As you can see, in particular, we have a great impact with bicycles and motorcycles. Motorcycles is a particular issue in the developing world where a lot of people that do not have access to a private vehicle nor to mass transportation, they have to use a motorcycle. And you see cities like Bogotá or Buenos Aires having really high numbers in terms of traffic crashes involving motorcycles, bicycles, and trucks. And in New York City, last year in 2019, the number of cyclists involved with in fatalities with trucks was 67%. That really prompted the city to decide that they will be investing in cycling infrastructure $1.7 billion. All right, so now I would like to introduce my panel. We have a wonderful panel joining us today. Let me stop sharing my screen. Very good. So, Pedro Jomen de Gouveia comes from the Police Network. Pedro is a senior policy and project manager at Police Network. He coordinates the working group for governance and integration, focused on policy making for cutting-edge innovation, public participation, public-private dialogue, and equity. He also coordinates the working group for road safety and security, focused on making cities, streets safe and transport systems secure. We also have Ian Wainwright from Future Cities Logistics. Ian is a director of the Future Cities Logistics, an independent consultancy that works to create safer, cleaner, and more efficient freight and logistics. He spent 11 years working for Transport for London, where he managed the program encouraging operators and business to revise their delivery activity during the 2012 Olympic Games. He was also head of the freight and fleet team at Transport for London, managing the program to maximize the safety of freight activity and build on the lessons for the Games. Alison Conway comes from the City College of New York. Allison is an associate professor of civil engineering, City College of New York, and researcher for Metro Freight Center, BREF. Her research focuses on last mile, last 50 feet city logistics interactions with non-motorized transport. Ellen Townsend from the European Transport Safety Council. Ellen is a policy director at the European Transport Safety Council. Ellen has more than 2 decades of experience in European public policy, including 12 years as a senior policy expert at ETSC. As director of policy at ETSC, since 2006, she has led the work advising the European Commission, Parliament, and member states on road safety issues. She has extensive experience working with road safety organizations, policymakers, and decision makers across the EU on road safety policy infrastructure and enforcement. Welcome, Pedro, Allison, Ian, and Ellen. I just want to make sure we have Ellen on the line because I think we were having some difficulties with her. We are still waiting for Ellen, so let's get started. And I would suggest that we do the Menti when Ellen is with us. Is that okay, Travis?
That sounds great.
Very good. Okay, so let me get started with Allison. Allison, we're trying in this first section to diagnose what is the problem. What specific challenges do freight operations pose on mixed-use streets? You have to unmute yourself. Very good.
Sorry, I'm just pulling up a slide quickly, and that'll help kind of illustrate some of these issues. So the slide that I just pulled up on the screen, these are all pictures that I took out on the street here in New York City of just walking around with my camera looking for the challenges that freight both faces and poses on streets. I think when we talk about designing mixed-use streets, the most obvious challenge is that there is an inherent conflict between designing for large vehicles and designing for vulnerable road users. So when we design a street for pedestrians, we want to minimize crossing distances. We want to minimize the amount of time they're spending in the street. And to achieve that, we want narrow travel lanes, narrow parking lanes, and small turning radii at intersections. So I think that's probably the clearest challenge that we deal with. There's just this inherent difference in the way that those different users use the street. The second, and I think Ellen probably once she joins will address this in more detail than I will, is that large vehicles and trucks in particular, but really any type of large vehicle, typically have blind spots, and those blind spots present a particularly dangerous situation for pedestrians and cyclists. Those blind spots can be in front of the vehicle, adjacent to the vehicle, on either side, both on the driver's side and on the other side of the vehicle. So again, when we talk about this issue of safety and conflicts between trucks and bicycles, these are the issues that come up. But there are also additional issues that kind of sit under the surface and we maybe don't as explicitly think about. The first is that when we're thinking about roadway design, we also need to think about what the vehicle is actually going to do when it stops, when it needs to conduct a parking maneuver or loading activity. And what happens is when freight is not properly accounted for, when we're allocating street space, for example, we end up with situations like those you see on the bottom left and the top right, where you've got freight vehicles actually obstructing either motor vehicle travel lanes or a bicycle lane. And so then that presents a new challenge for the users of those facilities where they need to change lanes, or where they may be making a passing maneuver where they don't have clear visibility of potential oncoming conflicts. So we need to think about not only, where a vehicle is going to park and how much space is required for their parking, but even once they get off the vehicle, how are they going to behave? Again, something we often forget about is that driver of that freight vehicle, once they get off the vehicle and are making their delivery, they actually become a vulnerable roadway user themselves. And so that top right picture, not only shows an obstructed travel lane on the left, actually a second travel lane now has a driver trying to offload from a side loading truck into a second active travel lane. So that's not only a safety conflict for the driver, but it's probably an even more perilous situation for that operator. The same can be seen in the bottom picture on the right. This is a location where we actually have a curbside bicycle lane. And so the truck parking was moved off of the curb to, be in that buffer area that you can see a little bit at the bottom of the picture. The challenge is that we didn't think about how that driver is then going to get that cart up onto the curb at mid-block. So what happens is that driver is actually walking in an active travel lane to the corner where he's able to maneuver that cart onto the vehicles or onto the sidewalk. So, this slide just kind of summarizes, we need to think about the differences in the way that we design the streets for these vehicles. We need to think about the parking and loading activity. How might we need to design to best accommodate both of these? And these are things I'll discuss later in the webinar. And then finally, thinking about the actual freight operator as a vulnerable road user as well.
Thank you very much, Alison. Very, very good points. I am really interested about this inherent conflict designing the streets for vulnerable users of the road and for deliveries that we need so much in our cities. All right, while we wait for Ellen, I think I would like to start talking about the technologies and solutions. And for that, I would like to ask Ian, what freight vehicles technologies are available to improve multimodal safety? There are technologies that target the driver. For example, we have seen SendDrive or Greenbox, some work on the vehicle, large front and side windows, intelligent speed assistant, assisted braking. Can you give us some insights on the roles of technologies? How are they playing a role to addressing safety issues in urban freight?
Okay, I'll just go spiral back slightly because I think there's some stuff about, as Alison was saying, about just when we address freight and the safety issue that freight is often perceived to create, just where that sort of fits, because I think there's some things here that we just need to think about. So if you can see the slides.
We can see them.
Because obviously freight is one of the road users, and freight is a problem, and without doubt, if you're involved in an incident on the road network between a large object and a small object, the chances are the smaller object is going to suffer more than the large object. But there's also this fact, and I used this graphic from one of the trade associations here in the UK, is that the carrying capacity of those vehicles is very different. So one large truck against potentially, in this case, 100 cargo bikes. So there's some issues about sharing space and understanding that it's going to be different for a parcel than it is for perhaps for construction material. And that safety is one aspect of city priorities. Clearly, it's an important aspect, particularly at the moment, but also issues about decarbonisation, and there's issues about congestion and energy use and improving the economy. So we have to factor that all of those are other aspects in there. Also, why is the operator there? They're trying to fulfill us as customers, our requirements, and their issues are about cost, they're about service level and reputation. But if you look at a truck, it is often controlled, in most countries, they're controlled by some form of licensing. There are vehicle inspections, The drivers have done additional training to drive the large trucks, and they are therefore perhaps professionals. There may be professionals within smaller fleets as well, but traditionally in smaller vehicles and cargo bikes and motorcycles, the annual inspection is less formalized. Certainly cargo bikes, there's very little in the way of regulations controlling their behavior and how they're manufactured. And there's some real issues with some of the manufacturing. There's no recognized driver training programs, and there's a predominance of gig workers, which means it's socially unsustainable in a number of places where these people aren't being able to earn a full living. So safer freight is about the operations of the vehicle and the driver. I'll skip over that one. So in terms of, as we look at just the vehicle side of it, there's a number of things that can be built onto a truck to make sure that it is fit for purpose. Certainly, as Alison was mentioning and Claudia was mentioning, the issue about blind spots and the cameras to address those blind spots. Things like now close proximity sensors, which are RFID, this radar technology, and the side bars, the side protection bars. If the vehicle like this particular picture is a sort of a construction vehicle, it's off the road to be able to fit on a construction site with an uneven surface. Why can you still use those on an urban city road? And issues about audible alerts and things, if the vehicle in the UK is turning left, in most countries is turning right. In London, they've been doing some work about what they call direct vision standard, and this particularly working with both Amsterdam and Copenhagen and lobbying into the EU. And I'm sure this is something that Ellen could mention as well. It's just that now this design is going to start to be addressed in trucks in Europe, but actually looking at what the driver can see from the cab. As human beings, we're used to seeing with our eyes and our senses, and it's to do with understanding what can be seen. Alison mentioned street design and things. There's issues about turning circles. There's issues about the curbside furniture. So in things in this case, on the left-hand side, we've got a bus stop. You know, a bus stop between a food store and where the vehicle parks is clearly a problem. But there are issues. So for instance, on the right-hand side, next to the traffic lights, there's what's called in the UK a Trixie mirror, where actually you can put something onto the traffic lights to enable the drivers to see down the side and address their blind spots. And there's some other elements which perhaps whilst technology, issues about from traffic control centres, they can often see when problems occur, get the emergency response quick. They can go and learn the lesson. And some issues about sort of perhaps changing how the drivers are trained in the first place. These drivers, and there's a video, the link there, to sort of look at a safe urban driving course, where the drivers of HGVs are put back on bikes so they experience what the cyclist experience, because it's about sharing the road. I'll stop at that point and hand it back.
Thank you very much, Ian. This was wonderful. And I, first of all, would like to welcome Ellen. She just joined us, so that's wonderful to have her with us. Thank you for joining us, Ellen. And let me continue. We are gonna go to a question for Pedro, and then we're gonna come back with our Menti questions. So Pedro, we know that road infrastructure is fundamental when we improve traffic safety in our cities. How can our streets be designed safer when we take urban freight into account? That's the million-dollar question, as Alison has said in her previous remarks.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say briefly, I would set out 4 points. Number one, we think with words, and the words we use condition the way we think. I have a problem with talking about road safety because, in fact, what we're dealing with is not road safety, it's road danger. As a designer and planner, and having had 20 years experience in working for a city and dealing with many colleagues from the planning and traffic departments, I would really set out that if we assume that what we are dealing with is road danger, and we will not look at the practices that Alison showed, as something that is deviant to the norm, but it's something that is common practice. Doesn't make it good, but really focuses us, everybody making decisions about use of the right way, to expect danger, it to really focus on reducing the danger that exists and assuming that as a key job. This may sound very abstract, but I found during my 15 years practice that it's, the mindset that you use is very, very important. Another point I would say is the importance of dealing with, focusing on dealing with structural issues, which for example, for the police, for people managing, the use of the right of way, often we kind of easily fall prey to focusing on behaviors and on educating people and on enforcing. Now, there's the common, everybody knows the three E's of road safety: engineering, enforcement, and education. They're all important, but we must understand that space, this configuration of space, generates patterns of behavior, and patterns of behavior are called culture or habits, if you like. And if we want to change the habits, we must, if we don't change the infrastructure, we make it very hard for example, for the police to enforce a law, because the common practice will be illegal, and the police will easily find it, police officers on the street will easily find it very unmotivating, to say the least, or unpractical to enforce the law hundreds of times a day. And so we have to look at structural issues that generate and sustain risky behavior. And definitely, from my experience, in many cities, but it's, the enormous lack of spaces of parking. Parking has the private car parking has a monopoly. And so people doing deliveries, there's a fight for parking, and spaces for parking during deliveries are in many places non-existent, or spaced by 100, 200, 300 meters. And people who are not doing deliveries, just looking at the drawings, think that's reasonable. Well, if you're carrying a 50-kilo package, it's not, and you have to run between errands, it's not. And so it surprises me that in our cities today, we do not find at least one 8-meter long space for parking during deliveries in every block. I mean, it doesn't make sense. How is it that? It's this huge lack in infrastructure that really sustains these risky behaviors. On the one hand, parking is very important, not only the width of the road. Then a third point I would say is, we must set our expectations high and really act on them. And this is also a change of mindset that is important. Everybody will point out practical difficulties, and people are, people doing deliveries, they're just doing their job. How can we go after them and this and that? I mean, the key step ahead with the Vision Zero is that you really want to achieve zero. And so that you do that extra mile to not literally to change things. And so and the important things here for freight, I believe, is that to understand that the same way that road safety can be a driver for the promotion, for the shift towards sustainable mobility, interestingly, road safety can also be a driver for the changes that many players in the logistics sector want to achieve. Because, because of road safety is a great reason to limit the tonnage and the volume of vehicles going around. Road safety can be one of the best arguments, for example, to promote cargo bikes, logistics hubs, etc., small delivery centers inside the city. And so, lockers. And so actually, this is a third point I think it's important to make. I don't want to monopolize, so I'll just kick the ball now to back to Claudia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pedro. And I would like to go now to Ellen. Ellen, you have been doing research with the European Traffic Safety Council on this issue of heavy vehicles and vulnerable users of the road. And we would like to go to Europe with you and to learn a little bit more what is going on there. What are the type of crashes? What are the trends? Who is involved in these crashes? Please, can you tell us a little bit, but before we do that, I would like to have our audience answering the Menti questions. If Travis, can you help me put in the Menti questions? You are gonna see it in the chat box as well. Great, and the first one is, in the EU, about what % of road deaths are a result of collisions with commercial vehicles, including light and heavy duty vehicles? Just as a reminder, you have a link in the chat box if you want to participate in the Menti survey. Okay, our participants have started to answer the question. What do you think? We have someone that is saying it's about 25%. Very good. Let's give another few seconds. 40%. All right, it seems like our participants have started using the link, so that's wonderful. It seems like we are having a little bit of an issue with the link. Ian is warning us about it. Okay. We're gonna have to move on, but I would like to ask Ellen to tell us, what is the percentage, Ellen, who is involved in these traffic crashes?
So it's 25%.
Wow, that's a very very good. And would you like to continue to tell us more about who is involved?
Yeah, so if I just try now to go back to the slides, can you see my first slide?
Yes, we can see it now.
So apologies, first of all, I had some technical issues joining the meeting, but I'm here now. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Welcome.
Thanks. Is the audio okay?
It's very good, I think so.
In May, in the middle of the lockdown, ETSC published a report looking at HGV, so that's in Europe, over 3.5 tons, and light goods vehicles, so under 3.5 tons, a report bringing together data from across the EU. We were looking at deaths. We also wanted to find data for serious injuries, but it was not possible. And also some very important data in relation to speed. So one of the key issues in this. So this is within the context of our Road Safety Performance Index, our PIN program, where we are comparing member states' performance and trying to identify and promote good practice to inspire political leadership, so to motivate the countries to work harder. And well, this is the first slide showing that, in fact, deaths in HGV collisions are declining more slowly than other deaths. So clearly this is a priority area that we need to work on. And yeah, so it's one in 4 deaths. Okay, now on to the next slide. So who is involved in collisions with HGVs? Well, 1 in 4, sorry, even more, 30% are vulnerable road users. We have 13% pedestrians, 7% cyclists, 8% powered two-wheelers. 12% are actually the truck drivers themselves. Now, this slide shows you the variation in the different countries. And in some countries, the situation is worse than in others. So for pedestrian deaths, much higher pedestrian deaths in the UK, Lithuania, Portugal, Latvia, Romania, and Ireland. So perhaps the other colleagues want to comment on that. And then cyclists, for cyclists, Denmark, Netherlands, okay, high numbers of cyclists there, of course, but also Belgium. Right, then the next one, well, in terms of where these collisions are taking place, most of them, 54% on an EU average, with some variations, as you can also see here with the breakdown of the different countries. Most of them are on the rural non-motorway, which is about the same if you look at all of the traffic, so not just specifically for trucks, but it's 23% of the deaths are on urban roads and 23% on the motorway. So that's the breakdown on where. So I mentioned speed as being a very important priority to tackle well across all of the different types of road users, of course, big priority for road safety. So here, through our panelists, we have PIN panelists, representatives in each of the different countries who are gathering the data. We managed to get data from 10 EU countries. And if you look at the reports, you'll see quite some variation, but unfortunately, the main message is that there's still quite a high level of non-compliance with the legal speed limits. So between 17 and 64% on urban roads are not complying, and 8 to 30 on rural roads. Now, that level is quite similar to the level of other road users, but I would say the key difference here is that these drivers are professional drivers. So they're carrying a heavy load, so they should be complying with the speed limits. Yeah, I think that was the last one. I've got another slide for when we come to the discussion later on, but it's a very large report gathering the data, but then also looking at the different recommendations, which hopefully we can discuss in the discussion round, and also gathering best practice examples, so from cities and from countries that are taking some action to try to reduce the level of deaths from heavy goods vehicles and vans.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Yes, we look forward to hearing more about the solutions. And precisely going to that area, I would like to ask Alison, how are cities safely incorporating freight into multimodal street design?
I just waiting a second so I can get the slide up. While I pull the slide up, just to put in context what I'm talking about here, I want to be clear that the solutions that I'm going to be talking about are specific elements that we need to think about in terms of design. When we actually think about designing or improving safety in the urban context regarding trucks, there's a lot of different types of solutions that we can implement. So we can improve education programs, we can put new technologies on trucks. Ian already referred to a few of those. We can think about the operational control of the street by separating out signalized movements with bike-specific signals, things like that. So what I'm focusing on here really is just the specific design elements and what are the different things we need to think about when we're designing the streets to try to minimize the number of conflicts that are going to occur. And so I've got a couple of key points and some illustrations of specific solutions that address these key points. So the first is simply just recognizing what types of freight vehicles you're going to have operating on the street and providing infrastructure that allows them to have safe operations. Examples shown on the left. This is a mini roundabout. As you may be aware, trucks typically have difficulty navigating roundabouts because trucks have high centers of gravity and they are prone to rollover when traveling in a tight circular path. So if we're designing a roundabout in a street where we do expect there to be large vehicles, we need to think about how can we incorporate specific elements, such as this mini roundabout would have a flush or mountable center island so that a large truck actually wouldn't need to maintain the circular path as it navigates. The second point is that this does not mean we should only be designing our streets for trucks. There are ways that we can balance the needs of different users. The graphic shown on the right is an asymmetrical median nose. So this is something you could use in a location where you want to keep a compact intersection. You want the pedestrians to have short crossing distances. You want to provide grade separation in the median, but you also need to allow a large truck to navigate this corner. Now, often we'll say, well, large trucks shouldn't be operating in urban areas, right? So we should just get rid of the large truck, then we don't have this problem. Ian already alluded to the point that bigger trucks carry things more efficiently, so we need to consider that point. We also need to think about things like, if we're designing access to a warehouse where a lot of people ride public transportation to work, the bus stop might be located on the north side of this intersection. And so that's a place where explicitly trucks and pedestrians must coexist because of the specific types of operations that are going on there. And so this is just a really small tweak you can make to the design of the intersection to allow that larger turning radius truck to navigate while still maintaining the protection that's required. The third thing, again, I already pointed this out as a challenge, is to ensure safe curb and building access. So this graphic on the left is a very typical design that we use here in New York now. So about 10 years ago, we started implementing a lot of bus-only lanes for our select bus service, so express bus lanes. When these bus lanes were first started going in, the basic design that was used was to put the bus lane in at the curbside. And putting the bus lane in at the curbside was intended to maintain online bus operations. So it allows for more efficient bus operations. But in doing that, it completely took away access to the curb for both truck and passenger loading. And so what happened was there was lots of people parked in the bus lane because the trucks still needed to access the curb in order to make deliveries. And there was no space, as Pedro already pointed out. If there's just a complete lack of parking, it's just going to lead to illegal behavior if that's what's necessary to actually accommodate the basic functions on the street. So this design allows you to maintain that online bus loading by using those corner bulb outs. You do lose some parking by moving, having to use those bulb outs, but it still maintains a place where trucks and even passenger vehicles can access the curb for the things they need to. Fourth is that you need to provide adequate space, not just for the truck itself, but for loading activities. So the graphic at the top, you can see you don't just want a parking space that's long enough for a truck to squeeze in. That truck may need to deploy a lift gate, it may need to deploy a ramp, and those things need to be accounted for in designing that space. Finally, you need to clearly delineate when there are conflict areas. So that graphic at the top actually shows this as well. If a delivery person needs to cross that bike lane, it should be well marked with a crosswalk so it's clear that someone may be parking there. And the picture at the bottom is actually my university in New York. This is a loading dock, and just the trucks are going to mount that curb in order to access that loading dock. And so by using that red pavement, we're indicating that something different is going on in that location, so that if you're using that sidewalk, you can see that. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Excellent ideas and recommendations, Alison. Thank you very much. And Ellen, would you like to follow up and give us also some of the ideas on, the solutions that the EU is working on? We know that, for example, Vehicle speed and visibility are key risk factors related to traffic fatalities and serious injuries. How can we address both?
So for trucks, I mean, I'm sorry because I've missed some of the previous presentations, but I just came in at the end of Ian, and of course I heard Pedro talking of the three key areas. So looking at traffic law enforcement, engineering infrastructure, and then vehicle, as well as thinking about a bit of urban planning and logistics. On enforcement, we're in relation to speed, we are trying to encourage member states to do as much traffic law enforcement of speeding as possible. So that means introducing fixed cameras. We're also doing mobile checks with very visual police on the ground, but also making sure that they're able to pick up the lower speed limits that are sometimes in place for heavy goods vehicles. Now, there is European-wide cooperation amongst the police forces in the EU, and speeding is one of the key areas that they also have intensive campaigns on, targeting heavy goods vehicles every year. So that at least is one element. Then perhaps on vehicle, Ian, you had mentioned it right at the very end. So ETSC is working very hard on a new piece of legislation. So it's the General Safety Regulation, which will introduce two relevant standards, which will also apply to heavy goods vehicles. So one will be the Intelligent Speed Assistance, ISA, which means that new heavy goods vehicles will need to be fitted with overridable ISA by 2022 and then 2024. Now, of course, the big challenge is that the average age of a truck in the EU is 12 years old. So it will take a while for this to for all of those trucks fitted with the new technology to spread out on European roads. But whereas speed limiters are mandatory, this will also, the benefit of ISA is that it will also be able to encourage trucks to comply with speed limits. As we can see from the earlier data that I showed, they're not. So for example, if a truck is doing a 50 in a 30 zone, then ISA would be able to kick in and encourage the driver to slow down. So there's a big discussion at the moment on how this technology will work. But yeah, the act, so the piece of legislation has to be finalized by the beginning of next year. So there's quite a lot of pressure on this, and we really hope that this speed technology will help. Then the other area is on the direct vision. As Ian already explained, we have this difficulty with the blind spots. Pedestrians and cyclists, as well as cars, sometimes can be hidden to drivers because of the blind spots. And this new legislation will now bring in a new design standard for better direct vision. So this is also very welcome, but the dates are again, well, much further away in the future. So 2026 and 2029. And if we know, as I said, if we think again to this fleet renewal issue, it's going to take a while. But nevertheless, on vision, improving vision, there are things that we can do in the short and medium term. So I don't know if you've mentioned, Ian, apologies if you have, the sensors for turn assist. So this is also going to be introduced under the General Safety Regulation from 2022 and 2024. But countries at a national level are also trying to encourage operators to upgrade their fleet so that their vehicles have this new technology. So in our report, we talk about Germany, we talk about Italy. So Italy actually has allocated some funds for operators to apply to use to upgrade their fleet, renew their fleet, so that they've got trucks fitted with this technology. Then there's public procurement. So perhaps I can leave that for when we talk about cities, but of course at a national level as well. Governments, if they're buying in transport services, they should also be requiring these in-vehicle safety technologies. And then for the long term, then we will have this this new direct vision standard, but there are certain actions that already can be taken in the short and medium term.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Very comprehensive. I see, Pedro, you are raising your hand. Would you like to?
Yes, I would like to make a few
Comment.
comments, yeah, if possible. Very quick comments regarding some of the plans. Well, some of the issues that have been mentioned, specifically looking at one of the plans that Alison showed, of the and very pertinent questions she brought up. I would say the following. Number one, do we design streets? I mean, what do cities want to do? Do we design streets for the vehicles we have? Or should transport and delivery companies pick vehicles for the streets that we have? And I think maybe we should work for reversing the equation, and in denser consolidated urban areas, really design the streets we want to have, and then delivery companies pick the vehicles that can go on those streets. I think that's very important, because the point is also, second point, if we I know this is not what Alison is defending, by the way, so but just to pick on the issue, if we, because the problem with deliveries by trucks or it's the same thing that applies to, for example, that the urban myth of fire trucks, where you have people who are against traffic calming measures because for safety reasons, because then the fire trucks can go through. And I mean, this is all because of this hydraulics approach that you design for the biggest, so the biggest fits, and then everything works because of that. And the issue is that often, as everybody knows, the biggest vehicles in more central urban areas are the rarest. And if you make it easy for a big vehicle to go through, then it's very easy for smaller vehicles to go through fast. And so it would be really useful, for example, to work on ways that spaces that can accommodate big vehicles exceptionally. And these big vehicles, well, they may break some rules, but the free space is there. It's not necessarily marked as roadway. And a very important issue also that in the plan that Alison showed with the turning space, and that turning space, obviously you don't design by hand. You need specific software, which raises an important question of capacity in the traffic departments of many cities. I can tell you very quickly the story that a colleague of mine, when I was dealing with this, leading this team in Lisbon, my deputy who was working on CAD, he found this free software that allows you, it can work with CAD, and so it allows you to figure out the turning radius for vehicles, and for all sorts of vehicles and buses, because the issue at that time was buses. Anyway, we were really excited because we had been having meetings like for years with colleagues that would wear this, this transparent paper with this printed bus, like turning, like they would do it by hand. It was like, hey, they're going to be so excited. So we called them to show the software, and they were not excited at all because they saw it as internal loss of power. They wouldn't have the power to say if the trucks or the buses fit or not. These things are often played out inside organizations. It's one of the biggest obstacles to innovation, is that status quo is made of little powers. So definitely if we want cities to really better serve deliveries, and we need design standards. It's very, very important. And finally, again, not to monopolize, I think that, the same way that for urban mobility, personal traffic, we really need to go beyond this archetypal vision that urban mobility is a man with a car that he parks and goes to the office. And that's pretty much urban mobility. We also, in freight, we also need to go, especially for consolidated urban areas, we really need to go beyond this archetypal vision that freight is trucks. It'll be more and more cargo bikes, autonomous lockers, drones. They're not ready to be deployed now. And I know about the huge changes that are necessary in the logistic chains, but the technology is available already. And if cities don't, coming back to the first point, if we don't adapt our spaces to really require the use of those sorts of much safer vehicles, then their deployment will be will take much more time.
Just briefly on that, I think there's two sides to it. One is getting the strategy right, so that we know long term, as Ellen said, the changes to the safety regulations for vehicles in the trucks in the EU, is a 9-year program. What we're going to try and do is, while we deal with that, make sure the city strategy right is these are the streets that we want to sort of travel down as individuals. What we also need to do is do some short-term stuff. Deal with the training, deal with the fixing of the issues. If people are jaywalking when they shouldn't be, is that policed? There's some of that stuff that we could use the technology for today and actually fix some of those issues rather than wait till everything's sorted. It's the hole in the roof. One of the things is putting the bucket there, the other one is fixing the hole. And some of this stuff, fixing the hole, is a long-term strategy. We've got to sort this stuff out today.
I fully agree.
Very good. And since you are in, Ian, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the work that you did around the 2012 Olympic Games? Because you started rethinking about how London can have their deliveries in a different way, with all this influx of visitors coming in. So that might be a real example that we can start looking at.
Okay, so obviously the Olympics should have been happening this year, and I feel really sorry for the people of Tokyo for it not happening there, because it's an amazing event in your own town. The issue is people worked out how, obviously how the athletes are going to get to all the games. They worked out how the spectators were going to get to games, and there was a program of travel demand management of how people were going to get around the city. And nobody had thought, how do you make sure that deliveries to the supermarkets, to the offices, to the restaurants were still going to occur? And that was the program that I was involved in. And basically, it involved talking to the industry, talking to the freight industry, talking to the business community, and saying, what information do you need and when do you need it? Because there's an issue there about how you deliver during the games. And then from then on, it was how we, as I was at the time with Transport for London, how you work with the industry to deliver the long-term program. And that's how we came out with some of these things like direct vision and such like, was by talking through what the problems were, doing research that the industry could support, because they would get actively involved. I've got some examples I can show if that's relevant. But some of this stuff is about really working out who are the people who know. They're the ones that are doing it day in, day out. We as individuals within cities need to determine who's going to pay for some of that. Because either we pay some higher prices for some professional drivers and some good vehicles, or we pay the social costs of the road safety statistics and the dirty air. So I think there's some balance there that we have to think through as well.
And that sounds great, Ian. And if you have any of those pictures available, that would be wonderful. When I go to Allison, and we have an increased amount of deliveries now with COVID-19. We are not going to the stores. We are asking everything to come to us. Now the main question is, is there any room for freight demand management? How these approaches can help cities to manage not only road safety, but other externalities?
Yeah, so in city logistics, I would say there are three basic ways, and there's probably more than this, but these are the ones that are most talked about, to manage the conflicts associated with goods movement in a city. And all of these are very popular in the sort of complete streets literature. The best way to deal with freight is to get rid of it. And that's the reality is there's a lot of constraints. So these are all really good strategies to strive for, but we also need to recognize the potential barriers to implementing these. So for example, we can try to shift goods movements into times of day when there are less other users of the street. So if we can conduct our freight deliveries during late night hours or very early morning hours when there aren't pedestrians on the street or there aren't bikes on the street, we can remove a lot of those conflicts. But implementing a time shift requires buy-in from quite a few stakeholders in the freight world. So you need to have a carrier who's willing to make that delivery. Carriers in a place like New York are actually usually very willing to do off-hour deliveries because it's a much easier delivery for them. They're not sitting in congested traffic. They have easy access to the curb. The stakeholders that present the biggest barrier to this are two. There's the receivers. So if I'm delivering to a business that is not open during late night hours, that business now has to provide staffing or some sort of technology-based access to provide secure access to their building. These solutions are all in development, they're all coming, but right now this has been a major barrier to uptake of off-hour deliveries. There's also the community. So many cities, in New York, we have less restrictions on time of day movements, but for example, in Philadelphia, the closest major city to here, there are noise regulations that prohibit truck movements during those late night hours and specific types of truck movements. And so in that case, we've got sort of a tension between the noise impacts of the truck and the safety impacts of the truck, and those need to be weighed. The second issue with, both Ian and Pedro have talked about is implementing mode shift to more pedestrian and bike friendly vehicles. This is an example of a vehicle used in Paris. I've actually done a lot of work in cargo bike research here in the US and in Europe. Cargo bikes have really great applications for things like parcel deliveries in dense urban environments. They are absolutely a feasible solution. However, again, the actual implementation of these cargo bikes, there's some regulatory challenges that we don't necessarily think about. So here in New York, it's taken a very long time to allow cargo bikes to operate. First, we had some restrictions on the use of electric assist devices. Those were put in place with nothing to do with this type of vehicle on the road, but because of perceived, at least, unsafe operations of motorized bicycles on the road, we have actually regulations that prevent that. We also have city regulations that define a bicycle as being 2 or 3 wheels. So some of the most popular cargo bikes in use in Europe are actually 4-wheeled vehicles. They're recumbent bikes, which were specifically designed that way for rider ergonomics and to have a balanced load as you're carrying. And just kind of outdated regulations prevent us from actually putting those vehicles on the road here. So a lot of those regulations need to be addressed before you can actually shift to cargo bikes. The other challenge, which Ian already raised, is just that there's simply capacity restrictions on how much you can put on a cargo bike. For parcels, they are a really good solution. For local deliveries, express deliveries, that's why we've seen so much growth here in New York in cargo bikes. We've got things like on-demand groceries, 2-hour Amazon Prime Now deliveries. This is a great solution for those. But if you're hauling concrete or large amounts of waste, that's not going to be an appropriate vehicle. Finally, there's this, lockers are one example, centralized delivery points. If we can create delivery densities, as we shift to e-commerce and particularly on-demand e-commerce, we've basically disaggregated our freight movements onto more vehicles and going to more locations. We've also increased the rate of failure. So failure is when a delivery is attempted and there's no one there to receive it. And so the goods go back, and then you have to do it again. And so we've generated all these inefficiencies in the system. Also, returns with e-commerce are a huge issue. And so if we can implement solutions like this, where we have a shared delivery point, we're minimizing the number of places that truck is making a delivery, stopping, and we're minimizing the excess mileage due to those failures. So with that, I'll turn it back.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alison. Very, very interesting to see all what New York City is thinking about, you know, changing and adapting. But I would like now to go to Ellen and ask her about, you know, what we are going through COVID-19. We are seeing an increase in deliveries and also the number of people walking and cycling. How can we best manage the natural conflicts that will occur? What is the political stand of cities right now? What are European cities discussing in this moment? Is to regulate and reduce the number of deliveries, or is to manage? How are they responding to this crisis?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, for this very, very interesting discussion. In fact, it's really live at the moment in the EU. We've got some new second waves popping up. So this challenge, this dilemma of people feeling frightened about using public transport, wanting to walk, cycle. Of course, that's fantastic. But also sometimes then we get in their cars, and then on the other hand, the deliveries which are still ongoing. So in terms of what cities can do, I've got four different recommendations. I just wanted to mention that last week we published a report which was looking at the road deaths, the road safety situation for the month of April 2020 compared with April in some of the last few years, so the average April from 2017 to 2019. And I think there are two interesting findings. One is that although road deaths went down by 36% on average, you would think that this is a street from Paris, that it would be down, we'd be at zero, but we weren't. Of course, we need to see why that happened. And then one of the other findings was that there was an increase of high speed. So in fact, I've heard they're now being called Corona races. So people who see these empty streets and say, woohoo, okay, now time to go fast. So great challenge. I think it's been a very, very interesting, very encouraging seeing cities take action. So investing in vulnerable road user infrastructure, pop-up bike lanes, widening pedestrian paths. And the second report that I've included here is from the European Cyclists Federation. So they've tried to track commitments and implemented kilometers of infrastructure to support not just cyclists, although it is mainly cyclists, so they're also looking at pedestrians. And it's about half of the big metropolitan cities in the EU are implementing some sort of infrastructure measure, which is encouraging. Most of this, so 3/4 of cycle lanes, but there are also some car-free sections that are being introduced, traffic calming. So this is very much welcomed in terms of giving some extra motivation to introduce some of the measures that we've been asking for a long time, which will also help in terms of the interaction between heavy goods vehicles and vulnerable road users in cities. So I think in terms of what else cities can do, I already mentioned public procurement, so introducing their own standards for cities, for vehicles operating on their books, but also then down the supply chain. And I also worked on a project on work-related road safety, where we also had London as a best practice example for encouraging and promoting this, sorry. Then, yeah, this has already been discussed, but introducing access restrictions for vehicles, heavy goods vehicles, which are high risk to pedestrians and cyclists who are not complying. So I guess that's more the stick approach if you've got the carrot of trying to encourage them. And then, yes, introducing logistic plans, as Alison, you were mentioning, looking at loading and unloading only at times with fewer vulnerable road users. So we include in our report the example of Antwerp, where they had a pilot to avoid school drop-off and pick-up times, and that's being extended out. Austria has introduced legislation which says that trucks actually can't turn right, so they're driving on the right, to avoid the interaction with the vulnerable road users at that crucial intersection point, unless you have turn assist. So yeah, even if turn assist is not as good as full-blown direct vision. And then, well, I think the other point to mention is employers. So any schemes that can encourage employers to change their journey planning, look at shift management, the sort of opposite to just in time. Right, I think that's it. My time's up. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ellen. And I want to talk to Pedro, because Pedro, you work in this board and you really led the Vision Zero plan there. I know that one of the areas where you work was freight. So I want to hear from you, what are the measurements that were put in place, and also how difficult the process was, because you know, we are talking about truck companies, and they are normally, as Ian said at the beginning of the call, the ones that are blamed for all the issues in cities, but also very needed to have the goods that are requested for everyday life. So how was the process and what you ended up putting in place? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would pick up exactly what Ian said a while ago, that first of all, you need a strategy, you need to know what you want. And the first problem that we had to deal with, and that, I mean, most cities have to deal with, is that this sector of deliveries and the urban logistics has mainly been left for the market to deal with. As a design and planning professional, I can tell you that it's only when I came to Polis and in Lisbon started specifically looking at this matter did it become an issue for me. It's not familiar with most design and planning professionals. You know, people doing public space, etc. Oh, they're the shop owners. They're complaining about deliveries. That's most often how the issue comes. There's a world, obviously, of challenges and opportunities, but you know, for most people working in the mobility and planning and urban design sector, it's kind of way out there, and it's not motivating. I mean, freight seems boring. Actually, it's not, but that's one of the big problems. So because of all this ignorance, or just this being out of the radar, or just being, you know, this attitude of, you know, for the market to solve, there's no thought about it on a policy level, and even on the level of the organizations. And one of our first steps was to get people thinking about it. I can tell you that it's happening in many cities. Polis right now is gearing up for its annual conference, and there were some interesting submissions by different cities, you know, where they faced the same challenge from Western to Eastern Europe, and where they, you know, started building knowledge centers to learn about freight and to establish working connections with companies that do deliveries. So, but you know, so I would say, as obvious or as abstract as it may seem, you know, I would pick up the words of the Roman philosopher Seneca from I think 500 after Christ, where he said, you know, for a ship that has no port, you know, no wind is favorable. So cities first must get their act together, know and city professionals. That's a capacity building effort, to understand the issue. Then cities must have tools, and tools as simple as, understanding the flows, typifying, learning from others, and typifying, as Alison also pointed out, we are dealing with different thoughts. Freight is not one big ball of fire, right? It's, deliveries to, it's supplies, delivering supplies to big surfaces or like shopping centers and supermarkets, whatever. It's smaller deliveries. It's, it's a world of possibilities. So definitely, like also another Roman, Julius Caesar, to conquer, and to conquer them, you have to divide them. And the same goes for freight, and bring freight out of this fuzzy ball of things better left to freight professionals. And finally, like somebody said, start with, in all problems, big and small, simple and complex. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And I would say that here, for all colleagues from other cities listening, I would point out right now that one thing you can do is quickly expand the number of loading spaces in cities. I would challenge, at least one place per side of a block, wherever, in any commercial street. And don't make them the size of a car parking space. Make them at least 10 meters long. So cities already have that power. With lots of money, little money, low tech, high tech. You can start creating loading and unloading zones right away. Cities can create and stimulate local startups to come up with delivery locker schemes, or they can encourage their national and dying post companies to come up with a new business model, or they can provide local shops with an additional source of revenue. One of the things that I find here in Belgium, I find very interesting, is the Belgian Post has this scheme where, different local shops can adhere to the scheme and the deliveries can be made there. Because, deliveries are a big problem for many people as well, not only in the no-shows are really a big problem. So, 3 practical advice. Number 1, understand what you want. Number 2, understand that it's not a big fuzzy ball, and create the channels to get tools and data about it. And, start where you are and do what you can. So, I'm not against the use of high-tech solutions. But for cities, the big problem is that they either involve high cost, or they involve a long R&D cycle that elected officials cannot afford 4 years. And so using available solutions, one of London is definitely one of the most interesting solutions, is good.
Thank you very
much.
much.
Hope that works.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pedro. And we had 40 minutes to the end of our webinar. So first of all, I would like to encourage our participants to post your questions. You can see a tab says Q&A. You can put your question there and I will ask the question to our panelists. But now, Ian, I know that you have been reflecting about what is happening with COVID-19 and how deliveries can be rethought. Would you please share with us the information?
Yep. So, right. So I think a lot of people are trying to rush towards whatever a new normal is. I think we have to recognize that there is a real problem that short-term public transport capacity is drastically down. There's reduced confidence in cities and large gatherings. The UK is not unique in this, but supermarket volumes basically doubled because everything shifted from restaurants and bars and all the eating out into the supermarkets. Home deliveries doubled. It's been essential, but if people are going back to work in offices, how does that continue sustainably is a real issue. And I've worked in the industry or around the industry for over 30 years, and delivery drivers as key workers, I'll have some of that. So it's a new temporary, so we have to understand that. Managing freight in any shape or form at any stage, and to achieve any of those city outcomes, you've got to recognise that they still need to be productive and cost effective. There's an issue about how much we pay for this. Technology can assist it, but it's only going to be a limited range of practical solutions. As I said, long-term, cities need a strategy for people and goods, and we need to basically avoid, shift and improve for safety as we do for decarbonisation. Minimise the number of road freight trips, shift the demand, and mitigate the impact. So if you take something whereby we're trying to deal with safer, if we just deal with safer vehicles somewhere down the bottom of this list, if we think about the cargo bike, well, actually, we need the spaces. We need, as Pedro said earlier, the urban logistics hubs to be able to deal with that. If we're trying to do, in this case, a low emission vehicle, but still more friendly for a city, as Alison said, some stuff about retiming. So the chances are we actually need to think in the long term about some clean vehicles and how we consolidate, how we procure stuff, as Ellen said. You know, how you procure goods and services is incredibly important. And in the EU, I think public procurement is about 14% of GDP. In India, it's about 17%. There's a whole series of things that we could do to actually change some of this, and quite simply. So just some thoughts. Doesn't change the priorities. I think the priorities perhaps are just intensified.
Very good points. Very good points, Ian. Thank you very much for your reflections. All right, so now we are going to be opening up to questions from our audience, and we have one that I would like for all of you to reflect very briefly, and it's about technologies. Sandra Ropart is asking us, okay, we decide finally on how we design our streets, and then tech companies come, you know, with sidewalk robots and autonomous vehicles, and the municipalities are seeing this as a sexy way to deliver goods, right? They want them in their cities because it looks very innovative, but you know, how do we really assess if this is what we need? Going back to the points of many of you on strategy. So what do we do with these wonderful entrepreneurs that are coming and trying to give us solutions, from drones to sidewalk robots? Any thoughts on that, Alison? I would like to get started.
Yeah, so I am not an expert on drones or sidewalk drones. I think you raise a good point that as we think about drones as a solution, you know, just in seeing other people's work on this over the last couple of years, these types of vehicles, ground drones, but especially air drones, present all kinds of new regulatory issues that we need to think about. So for example, I saw a presentation here in the US where, you know, housing associations have regulations about airspace, and so what's the implication when you have drones that are going to need to operate in that airspace? Same thing, I guess, with sidewalk space. I'm not sure we are thinking about it in that way, and I think it's a really good question, but I don't have a detailed answer.
Thank you very much, Alison. Ellen?
Yeah, I've not heard of special requirements, but we're also working at automation, automated vehicles, and of course there are also trials involving automated freight trucks ongoing in the European Union. And ETSC's sort of bottom line recommendation on this is that the vehicles need to pass the equivalent of a real world driving test. So if I were to apply the same philosophy to the sidewalk drone, is he able to interact in that full way as a human would? I mean, yeah, physically what is in the environment. So no would be my.
Thank you very much. Ian?
One of the greatest issue for freight deliveries is effectively on time in full. If you order your restaurant meal, you want it there in the, within the hour or whatever, you want it hot. If you're ordering something that's going to be delivered from the other side of the world, you want to know how long that delivery takes. The great thing with autonomous vehicles is potentially they can be safer because they'll stop for pedestrians, they'll stop for cyclists. The issue being is the more people that get in the way of them, the slower they're going to be. So there's a trade-off there between the reliability and the journey time and the safety element. The other side, I would say, is with the technology, cities and us as individuals need to be careful what we want, what we're getting involved in. I use Uber in London. Well, I haven't done for months because I haven't gone anywhere. But we all use sort of something like Uber. In London, the statistics said that the number of private hire taxis basically increased by something like 80% as a result of Uber in a 7-year period. So that's led to more congestion, which means there then has to be more restrictions. There's less space if we're not careful. So some of these things potentially have unintended consequences.
Thank you very much, Ian. And Pedro, would you like to have a final reflection on that?
Yeah. What is being talked about, the possibility of autonomous lockers going on. Let me start that again. I would say that we decided in the 20s to segregate traffic in our streets, and that was done for many reasons. And that has been that scheme, that way to approach traffic management in our streets through segregating the modes, putting motorized vehicles in the center and pushing pedestrians close to the building. That has pretty much dominated thought, the way we think and approach all new challenges in terms of mobility in our cities. The point is, as we move on and as we enter this new age where new needs and new solutions are available, I think we should question more and more this standard approach of segregating stuff, simply because there's no space to provide to every mode. And number two, because we know that motorized modes, namely cars, because their owners have higher social capital, they've always been allotted the best parts of the space. Now, this is not some sort of poetic tirade. It's really a technical approach. We don't have enough space for the growth in urban deliveries. The way it works today, we don't have enough space for all these deliveries, for the vehicles to go around, to park, to stop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, we either we have to find new ways to deal with the way we manage space. It's not only this is not only about deliveries. For example, the way we deal with space is really harming innovation in urban mobility. Just go back 2 years when e-scooters suddenly popped up everywhere. And still being left everywhere in the sidewalks and the users riding on the sidewalks. Why were the users riding on the sidewalks? Because the streets are segregated and they're afraid to death of riding on the roadway. Why are e-scooters parked everywhere? Because there's a monopoly of parking spaces for private cars. And so if we don't really look at new ways to approach the management of space. If not in different ways, in different parts of the city, because cities are very heterogeneous. Residential areas are one thing, city centers are another. If we don't come up with a new method, we're stuck. And we're always trying to fit new things into a scheme where they don't fit, or they will never fit well.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Alison, we have a question for you. Does New York City have data on deliveries in different communities during COVID? Do we know how deliveries have been changing by boroughs?
So I would say there's no open, publicly available data out there. There are a number of different organizations that have been conducting surveys to try to understand those. And the two city agencies, well, actually several city agencies have been very specifically engaged in goods movements, especially as they relate to food deliveries, making sure that residents have access to food during the crisis. So, you know, the Department of Transportation, the Economic Development Corporation, and actually the Department of Sanitation are all engaged in those. So I don't have a specific data set to point you to, but you know, all of those agencies are working on this issue.
Thank you very much, Alison. And the last question, I think I would like to ask Ian to answer this one very briefly because we're about to finish. We are basically saying here that we have infrastructure dedicated for vehicles, for bike lanes, for pedestrians. How do we work with city and government officials to create a space for more efficient urban freight?
I think I saw the question. So very shortly, I think there has to be some form of get-together discussion with the industry and other stakeholders, some sort of forum for discussion so that people recognise where the priorities are. And then there's some stuff probably around sharing some of the space. I think Alison's guide and certainly some of the work that's been done in New York, certainly in London, there's a streetscape guidance document effectively that basically shows how you can share the space for both trucks and for pedestrians at different times of day, the signage, the types of surfaces that you need and that type of thing. I think some of this stuff is, we have got limited space, we need to share that and particularly share this curbside.
Excellent, thank you very much, Ian. And with that, we have come to the end of our webinar on freight and Vision Zero. And I just would like to wrap up with some of the main thoughts. This is a very complex issue. It is about sharing the space in cities, and cities need it all. We need people cycling, walking, we need deliveries. So ignoring and blaming trucks is not gonna work. We have to work with them and work with the community. At the top, I think I have heard from each of you to think about the strategy. What is what we really want in our cities? And how do we go from there? Don't forget the community. And there are some iconic moments in the life of cities. For example, the Olympics Games in London. But right now we are living in an iconic moment. A pandemic. So probably this is the moment also to rethink how do we share this space. I think we cannot forget that at the end of the day, deliveries have to be productive and cost effective. And finally, in terms of new technology, we have to see if it is delivering for us and not just for the technology companies. So what is the impact and what are the unintended consequences? With that, I would like to thank you very much, Alison, Ellen, Pedro, and Ian. You have been wonderful panelists. I really thank you for your time and for participating. I thank you to all my audience today and to my colleagues that have been preparing for this webinar. Travis and Talia and Wes and Hillary, thank you very much.